Okay, looks like we've got a full house. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the SJVAPCD Environmental Justice Advisory Group meeting. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation via Zoom and webcast. Before we begin, there are some important guidelines and general instructions. Please silence your communication devices. And during the meeting, all public participants will be placed on mute by the host. Public members will not be able to mute or unmute manually. Audio from members of the public will be unmuted once they are recognized to make a public comment. I will call the meeting to order and ask the clerk for roll call, please.
Thank you. Ms. Martinez? Mr. Graywall? Graywall, sorry, I didn't hear you. I see you though. Thank you. Mr.
Here.
Freitas?
Here.
Ms.
Testing. Here.
Ms. Gutill? Here. Ms. Vielma? Mr. Helm?
Here.
Mr. Williams?
Here.
Mr. O'Brien?
Here.
Mr. Liba? Mr. Sanders?
Here.
Mr. Cunha?
Here.
To the chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Item 3 is approval of the minutes from June 2027. Was that, we had a meeting or was that the one that was, did we? Okay. Okay.
I move to approve.
If there aren't any objections, okay, we'll call for public comments, please.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Bakersfield on the minutes from June?
There are no public comments in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any public comments in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any members of the public in Fresno? I see none, and none online. Thank you.
Okay. With no comments, then I will deem them approved. Thank you. And then item 4 is public comments. At this time, it's made available for comments from the public on matters that are not on the agenda. It is requested that no comments be made during this period on items on the agenda. The public may make comments on each EJAG agenda item during the time allowed for public comments. Attention is called to the fact that the EJAG is prohibited by law from taking any action on discussion matters that are not on the agenda.
Do we have any public comments in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Are there any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comments in Bakersfield.
Thank you. No members of the public in Fresno and none online.
Okay, thank you. Then item number 5 is chair comments. And I don't have any other than to say thank you for all being here. We have quite a few, quite a big quorum this time, and I appreciate all of your time. Thank you for being here. Okay, then item number 6 is update on the attainment plans and rules.
Okay, I'm not used to new systems. Sorry about that. Good afternoon or good evening. My name is Emily Nealand. I'm the Director of Air Quality Planning here at the district. Back again to provide you with an update on our most recent plan and rule development efforts. Last meeting, I provided you guys with a number of updates with respect to a couple of the PM 2.5 standards. So I have some new updates on some of those developments that I wanted to bring to your attention. The first of which is last meeting, I notified you that the district and CARB had submitted an attainment date extension request to EPA for the 1997 annual PM 2.5 standard requesting to extend the attainment date from December of 2023 to December of 2024. And this is allowed under the Clean Air Act if you meet certain criteria, one of which is showing that you have clean air quality data for the previous year. So in 2023, we had record air quality data for the annual standard. So because of that, we did submit this request. And on July 8th, EPA proposed to approve this request to extend the attainment date. So just wanted to provide you with that most recent update. With respect to our 2024 PM 2.5 plan, last time we met, I let you know that the district governing board had adopted that plan just a couple days prior. Since then, the CARB governing board adopted the plan at their July governing board hearing, and then the plan was actually just submitted to EPA for their consideration today. So some updates on that effort as well. Last meeting, I let you guys know these updates, they still remain. We're kicking off our rule development efforts for the rules committed to within the plan, which includes our rules 4901, which is our rule for residential fireplaces, and then our rule 4550, which is our conservation management practices rule. So we are kicking off those efforts, hoping to schedule some workshops here in the coming months. And we've also kicked off our rules development efforts for a number of coating and adhesive rules that we committed to for contingency measures for the 2008 and 2015 8-hour ozone standards. So again, hoping to schedule some workshops here in the coming months as we get going on our rule development process. So with that, those conclude my updates, and I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Okay, any questions, Emmanuel?
Yeah, go ahead,
Oh.
yes.
Quick. Thank you. So your board approved the request for extension and cardboard approve it. So now that's it, or EPA has to approve it as well?
I'm sorry. With regards to the one-year extension request or the PM 2.5 plan?
The PM 2.5
Plan. Yeah, so CARB board approved it and now EPA will be considering it. So they have an 18-month clock under the Clean Air Act to review the plan and act on it. So typically, sometimes it takes a little bit longer, but yes, EPA has to take action on that within the Federal Register. Manuel, did you have a question as well?
Yeah, that was the same. So today, CARB did forward it to Region 9.
Yes.
So it's at Region 9, and they have, in essence, how long do they really, before the 18-month discussion, the 18-month would have started today, correct?
Mhm. It starts from the completeness finding, I believe. So,
And the completeness will be by EPA.
yes.
And what's their timeline? 90 days, 60 days? Or
I believe it's 30 or 60 days.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
I can confirm that.
Okay. Right, no,
So
that's,
then that starts the 18-month clock.
okay. And will we receive what, I guess, in a summary, what was sent from CARB from that board meeting? Because that board meeting was pretty long.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, I can send you a copy of, I think you're probably referring to the resolution that was submitted.
the actual document that was sent to Region 9.
Yeah, so the PM 2.5 plan that we adopted by our governing board, no changes were made to the plan contents themselves. CARB did include some language within their resolution related to some of the discussion that happened at the board meeting. So I'd be happy to forward you a copy of that
If you could forward
resolution.
that to
Yeah.
all of us.
Okay,
To
yeah,
Lauren
definitely.
and Laura, if that would be fine, Chair, if we can have it sent to all the members.
Yeah, that would be fine with me.
Okay, sounds great. Yeah, go ahead. Amy.
But the follow-up question is that, because yeah, it's confusing. There were a lot of comments about this and about that. So it wasn't clear to me if that meant that you guys have to change something, or CARB was changing something before sending it to EPA, but it doesn't seem that way, right?
So the plan itself, the language remains the same. I do believe that CARB included some language within their resolution that their governing board signed that's included in the transmittal to EPA that includes some discussion of what was discussed. And I think it's specific to what Chair Randolph had specifically directed the CARB staff to change within the resolution. So I can send a copy of that.
One more thing.
mhm.
Oh, sorry, we have a question just when you're available. But you go ahead, Mr. Quinn.
Yeah, go ahead, Manuel.
Could we, this is from the EJAG side, but could we also send that to the CAC members? Could we send that to the president, to the chair of that committee? So, because the CAC adopted a letter of support,
Mhm.
it'd be great now to have that sent to them before our next CAC meeting
Okay,
in September.
yeah.
That'd be-
So yeah, we'll give it to, Emily will get it to Katrina and Katrina.
Trina, yeah,
has
Trina
that-
could take care of
Or
that.
to the
Yeah, that'd be
boards,
perfect.
and committees will send that out.
Thank you very much.
Was there a question in Modesto?
Yeah, this is Tom, Helm. Just kind of a clarifying question, just so I know, the kind of the timeline. So the extension was from December 31st, 2023 to December 31st, 2024. So does that mean that we were kind of all waiting, for the process to carry out? So we were actually technically like over the deadline, but waiting for the approval for the extension, and that's why it needed to get to, or it did get to EPA today because it had to be before the last day of this year. Am I getting that correct?
So with regard to the 1-year extension and the attainment status for the 1997 annual PM 2.5 standard, we needed the 1-year extension because although 2023 air quality data was extremely clean, previous years included wildfire impacts. And so attainment for PM 2.5 standard is based on a 3-year design value. And so because of that, we were not able to show attainment with the 3 years of data, which would be 2023, 22, 21. And so we're confident moving forward with this year looking very clean thus far. We'll be able to show attainment with data from 24, 23, and 22. Hopefully that clarifies your question.
Yes, it does, but then it brings up another question. So isn't the wildfire data supposed to count as an extreme event that's not counted towards the air district? So how, or does it
Yes, so
why is it-
wildfires are considered an exceptional event. It does require
Exceptional.
extensive documentation in order to get that data removed. And so because of the timing that it takes in order to prepare that documentation compared to the clean data for 2023 and that we met that requirement for a 1-year extension, that was the route that we elected to go. And we actually also submitted exceptional event documentation to EPA in a separate process for the wildfire data, but that's yet to be acted on by EPA.
Okay, great. And this is I'm sorry, we're talking about the 97, the 2006 and the 2012 plan.
Yes, so it is the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, which addressed all 3 standards. The
Okay.
1-year extension is just for the 1997 annual PM 2.5 standard.
Okay, so well, when we say that the data from the last 3 years was extremely good, we're still not meeting the most up-to-date standards. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Most of the sites in the valley are meeting the most recent standards. With respect to the 15 microgram standard, which is the 1997 standard, all sites were below that specific standard. But yes, that's correct. In 2023, I believe some sites were still over the more recent standards, such as the 12 microgram standard.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
Yep, no problem.
Were there any questions in Bakersfield? Okay, seeing none. Keith, you had a question?
I'm just curious on the timelines for when they collect the data and when they stop collecting the data, the impact of the fire. So is it when the fire gets completely put out and then the data is, how does that timeline work? Fire starts, fire runs, takes 3 months, put it out.
Yeah, that's a great question. So my team specifically does not work on the exceptional events or the wildfire tracking. But in general, my understanding, and Ryan, feel free to add to this, is that sometimes after a fire has ended, there can still be air quality impacts from that poor air quality kind of staying in the valley, depending on meteorology. If an inversion layer is currently happening, some of that can still be trapped. So it could be days or weeks after the wildfire event where we still see some impacts from that, but it just depends on the specific situation.
It does run from, there is a clearing time, like where it gives a chance. So that counts as exception.
It could, yes.
Exemption.
It's specific to each independent event. But yes, it's my understanding that it could still span after the fire is actually put out, just depending on meteorology.
Any other questions? Anything online? Oh, we don't. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much.
So then, item number 7 is election of vice chair for a 1-year term.
No. For this, when she's ready to
Okay.
open it up.
So first I wanted to say thank you to Thomas for serving as vice chair for a couple of terms now. And is it 3?
Yeah, I think he's got 3
Is
terms.
it 3 terms, Thomas?
I thought it was just 2, but I could be,
Oh,
be
is
forgetting.
it 2? Oh, okay.
2-year.
No, they're 1-year terms.
Oh.
That's why I
Maybe-
thought he'd done 3
Maybe
already.
it felt like 3 terms.
Well, one of the years we didn't have a lot of meetings, it seemed like, so that's
Yeah, I was
maybe
gonna
why
say
it feels like that.
The pandemic just messed with how it seems time went by.
It did.
Was chair during the pandemic.
He knows.
It certainly did.
That feeling.
So with that, I'd like to open it up for nominations. Is your
If
mic on?
my mic is on, thank you. So I don't even know if this individual, I don't even know this individual really, but I was excited to see to get here and see that we have this member. I think maybe I was at actually the February meeting and he was introduced, but it's Mr. Gawal from Bakersfield. And I was going down the list of all of our at-large members, which are the non-appointed members. And I looked and I saw that every one of us here have served in leadership, except our newest member. And if he would be interested in serving as a vice chair, even if he's new, it doesn't matter. I would like to nominate him if he'd be willing to serve. So I would like to nominate Randeep Grewal if he'd be interested in.
I'll second that. I'll second that nomination. Oh, sorry,
Yes, let's ask Mr. Rawal if he's willing to accept
sorry.
the nomination.
Let's get his name right first. Graywall, right?
Grewal?
Graywall.
Okay.
You guys are exactly right. I'm brand new at it, but I don't mind learning. And if you guys would show me the ropes, I would try to fill it the best I can.
Okay.
So I can kind of go over if you want.
Yes, please. Go ahead, Ryan.
So, yeah, so the process that's set up is any of the members can nominate anyone. There's no requirements for secondary nominations. After the nominations have been received, the chair could then close the nomination process. And then at that point, if there was one, there would be a roll call taken. If there's more than one, then there would be a vote taken. And if there were ties, then it would, go back to another vote.
Okay. Okay, with that being said, is there any other nominations? Go ahead, Naomi.
It's a nomination and a question. Last time when we were here, we were considering maybe if Tom wanted to serve another term, but obviously we tabled this because he was not here. So it's unfair, right? To put down his name and not have an opportunity for him to say yes or no. So Tom, would you like to serve another term?
I am perfectly fine with allowing an opportunity for new leadership to emerge.
Okay, that being said, is there anyone else who would like to throw their name into the hat?
Move the nominations be closed.
I'd like to nominate Donald Trump.
No, we're not taking frivolous nominations, Keith. If there are no other names, then I call this closed, nominations closed.
And I'll call for public comments on the nomination process, and then I can call for roll.
Thank you.
Are there any public comments on this motion to nominate Mr. Graywall for vice chair in Bakersfield?
There are no public comments in Bakersfield.
Thank you. Any public comments in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. There's no members of the public in Fresno, and seeing none online, I will call for roll on this motion. Ms. Martinez,
Yes.
Mr. Graywall, you have no problem with this mic?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Ms. Gutiel,
Yes.
Mr. Freitas,
Yes.
Mr. Helm,
Yes.
Mr. Williams,
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien,
Yes.
Mr. Sanders,
Yes.
Mr. Cunha,
Yes.
chair motion passes.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Graywall.
Thank you all.
Okay, item number 8 is environmental justice training. This is something that Naimeen requested several times, and I'm really excited for. And with that, yes, please, Ryan.
All right. Dr. Ramos, if you don't mind, I'd just like to do a quick introduction and just share appreciation for your willingness to come and share your experience. So Dr. Ramos and Liz are part of the facilitation team that works with us very closely on implementing the state's community air protection, the AB 617 program. We've definitely learned a lot from them and learned from their experiences. And so they have a lot of knowledge and experience in this. And I think the presentation that they put together was going to be really helpful. And so to the point of Mr. Graywall and the opportunities to learn and to hopefully this presentation will help you in serving in your new role. But kind of setting the background, and thank you, Naimeen, for recommending this, the training to the group, kind of centering the reason why we're here, bringing it back to, why we're here in tonight's meeting and all the meetings and what we're trying to achieve as a group and providing more information to people in underserved, under-resourced communities and for their benefit. And so at this point, I'd love to turn it over to Dr. Ramos and to Liz. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for that warm introduction. My name is Dr. Amy Ramos, and tonight I am joined by my colleague, Liz Lev. We are delighted to be here this evening to offer a very brief training to support the very difficult work that you are charged to complete as being part of this group. Liz and I both have formal training as scientists and as applied environmental justice researchers. Today, we are here to offer what we're calling a customized training that's designed to foster your continuous learning of environmental justice perspectives. We explicitly hope to be able to move from the definition to practice. We value the tremendous endeavor of your group. That is, we encourage grassroots participation in district activities and outreach. And we understand that your goal is to ensure that all the populations of the Valley are enfranchised in all aspects of the district's mission. So to support this, if we can go to the next slide, please. What we hope to accomplish in today's training is to meet 2 explicit goals. That is, we hope to be able to cultivate a space for reflective practice that's grounded in historical context. We think this is extremely important so that you all can continue to move forward and to make the change that you all desire to make. The second goal of our training for today, in today's presentation, is that we hope that you all walk away with an increased understanding of environmental justice definitions and principles, so that they're not just the definitions that you see in your charter, that you see in the district's website, but they really are definitions that you can put into your practice. Lastly, we hope that with this presentation that folks will join these meetings feeling more informed and equipped to make more informed decisions using an environmental justice perspective, as you are intended to as being a member of this group. We can go to the next slide, please. So to kick off this training, we would like to start with some individual reflection. We realize that everyone is in a different space and that everyone has access to different things in front of them. What I am asking you to do at this moment in time is that if you can take out a piece of paper, if you physically have a piece of paper, great. If you don't physically have a piece of paper, maybe you can borrow one from someone next to you. Or if you're in front of your computer, I see a few folks who are here, but I can't actually see them. So if you can open a blank piece of paper, that would be great. So I'll give you a moment to gather a piece of paper and some sort of writing utensil. Maybe it's a pen, it's a pencil, whatever it may be. So we're going to spend some time reflecting on yourself individually without sharing aloud. And what I would like for you to do is embrace ambiguity for a second so that you allow us to help you think about being in the mindset of what it means to have your own lived experience that you bring to this group and that you bring to the decisions that you make as part of a member of this group. So if we can go to the next slide. What you're going to do on your piece of paper is at the center of your piece of paper, I'd love for you to write your name. It can be your birth name. It could be the name that you go by. So my name is Amy Ramos. My colleagues sometimes call me Ramos, Dr. Ramos, Amy. Now, whatever you're comfortable with, you can write your name at the center of that paper. And again, by yourself without sharing aloud, I'd love for you to brainstorm the various identities that you identify with and write them across your paper. These words should be scattered across the page, so not in a line. So for example, I have my name at the center of my page, you can't see it here, and then I have scattered across some identities. So I identify as a woman, so I wrote the word woman on this piece of paper. I am also a professor and I identify as a professor, so I wrote professor. I am a researcher, I am a scientist, and I'm writing these identities scattered across this paper. So I'm going to give you a minute to write down as many identities that you have. Maybe you're a parent, maybe you are a mother, a father, a caregiver, a grandchild, a grandparent. Maybe you're a business owner, maybe you're a rancher, maybe you're a farmer, an activist, a neighbor. Whatever identities you have, write them down. Now I'm going to have you spend the next minute writing down the outdoor hobbies or activities that you like or love. Now write them across the paper, in the same fashion, so scattered across the paper. I, for one, am a hiker, so I put hiker on here. I love to go outside kayaking, so I put kayaker. I love to walk outside. I put walking in nature. So write down any outdoor hobbies that you like or love, things that you engage in, write them across your piece of paper. Again, not in a line, they should be scattered across your paper. Lastly, if you could write down the foods that you love to eat. Maybe even the places you like to shop for food. Or the places you like to go eat at. Write down the foods that you love to eat.
That's going to be a real tough question for one of us in this EJAG. Real tough question on that one, let me tell you.
Okay.
Very tough.
Did you like it all?
Because I don't do much of that, but I'm going to put down. Yeah, I don't eat very much.
Okay, well,
that's okay. You gave a tough question, kid, a tough question.
Okay, well, if you're anything like me, I love to eat, and so I've run out of space here. I have so many identities and so many hobbies and so many things that I love to eat or places I like to go to. So now what I'd like for you to do is reflect on what's written on your piece of paper. And now you're going to draw a circle around the words that you wrote on your paper. Not a huge circle, just a circle around the word itself. So you'll have multiple circles.
A circle around each word.
Yes, please. A circle around each word. So if you have 15 words on your piece of paper, you'll have 15 circles. And now here's a tough question for you to reflect on. I would like for you to draw a line that connects your identity to each other and connects the hobbies or foods that you like to eat. So is there a line between you being a woman and being a gardener and potentially liking to eat fruits and vegetables? Because you wrote fruits and vegetables on there. Make a line that connects the identity to the hobbies and to the things that you like to eat. So you're physically connecting your identities and the things that you enjoy. So this
I
activity,
don't really, I'm
Oh.
not quite understanding because mine are like all over the place. So I'm not sure what you're asking.
that is exactly what I would love for you to ask, because they're all over the place. So you probably have scribbles, right? So mine looks like a kindergartner who was trying to fill in the blanks, and there's connections everywhere. Everything about your identity. I'm not sure whose comment that was. If you could state your name, that would be great.
Yeah, this is Laura.
Laura, thank you for that question. So Laura, you must have, given that I can't see your piece of paper, you must have multiple circles with words in them, and the lines are connected between everything, right? And so that is the reflection. I want you to reflect on how the identities that you have intersect, in this case, literally by a line that you've created, with the identities that you show up with, right? Many of you probably put that you are a professional in this space. Maybe you put your identity as part of being in this group. The line represents an interconnection between the identities of who you are and the things that you do. We don't have time and we don't have a space for everyone to reflect and share out individually. The point of this activity is for you to individually reflect on who you are, the things that you do, the places that you go to, the things that you eat, and who you are as a professional. Most importantly, what we want you to reflect on right now is how they intersect with who you are and allow you to show your identities in your professional and personal life. Most importantly, how have your identities influenced how you interpret what it means to use an environmental justice perspective? I'm going to repeat that again because that is the learning outcome for today. We would like for you to reflect on who you are, the intersections of who you are, meaning your identities, and the things that you do and you love to do, including hobbies and places you'd like to go and eat. How has that influenced how you interpret using an environmental justice perspective or lens? What people think about you, what people expect from you, what positive or negative experiences you have had, and maybe even reflect on how these identities have privileged you. This concept that we're introducing today, this intersectionality concept, is an approach that we use in the world of environmental justice and in social sciences as an approach that allows us to argue that the classifications that we have about our identities, so for example, our gender, our race, our class, and other parts of our core identity as humans cannot be examined in isolation from one another. That's why Laura's comment is so very perfect, because they all interact. All the identities that you have interact and intersect in your own individual lives. They should be intersecting in how you show up as a societal member in social systems, and they should influence how you show up on this committee. So we can go to the next slide. So now that you've had a moment to reflect on who you are and the choices that you've made across your life, right? Because you've made choices of why you have certain hobbies, why you like certain things. Maybe some of these choices were made for you, right? Maybe you made conscious, intentional choices to do things. Maybe it's because of how you were raised. Maybe it was because you were in a particular place at a particular time that allow you to have these core parts of your identity. What is important is that we acknowledge explicitly that how we make individual decisions that impact us and our loved ones, our neighbors, the places that we love, the communities, the earth, and beyond, are extremely important. And we want to acknowledge and make it explicit that everyone's presence here today and being a member of this group shows that we all have a common goal to work towards positively impacting the communities that have been disproportionately impacted. For whatever case it is, we are here in this moment at this time together, talking about how the world has ended in such a way that allows us to be here together. All the identities that you have and the things that you love to do have brought you to be here in this moment. So choosing to be part of the solution to move this work forward is extremely valuable and important. And it's something that there's something in what you wrote down that somehow has motivated you to show up today. And we know that the reasons that motivate you to show up today and to show up to work on a daily basis are going to vary for everyone. But the fact is that we're all humans and we all care about this planet. We care about other humans. We care about the Central Valley. And so I hope that this exercise allowed you to reflect on who you are and maybe allows you to think about what are your core values about yourself and how does that influence how you show up on a daily basis. With this in mind, if we can go to the next slide. Our goal, our second goal beyond reflecting for tonight is to build a common understanding of key concepts and shared language that we use to define environmental justice. We know that you know the basic definition. You're part of this group. It's part of all of the documented material that you have as part of your obligations that you've created. So as a reminder, it's impossible for us to talk about defining environmental justice without talking about power and privilege. So if we can go to the next slide. Anytime we talk about environmental justice, conversations come up in our work regularly. Why? Because as we just illustrated in this last example, your lived experience matters. Meaning the things that you wrote on your paper matter to you and they matter how you use those identities to influence your decision making. Therefore, environmental justice cannot be defined without acknowledging power and privilege. Meaning without the intentional, explicit focus on race. So a racial analysis too often gets replaced with class and income analysis. And very often we fail to acknowledge that it's really important that environmental justice was born out of the acknowledge of the race inequities that exist, in particular in this country, and for today's presentation in California. So what may seem like good decisions end up maintaining racial gaps or even worsening them if we don't ensure that we're talking about race. So as a group, it's important to build capacity and understanding of race and racism to best meet our mandate as an environmental justice group. So let me just share some definitions so that we can remind ourselves of some of the historical artifacts that have brought us all here together in today's meeting. So if we can go to the next slide. I'd like to define these terms because we don't use these terms loosely. These terms, power and privilege, for today's conversation, serve as facilitators for understanding and defining environmental justice. So let's start with power. By definition, power is access and control over resources and decision-making and governance. So power is unequally distributed, thereby allowing some individuals or groups greater access and control over resources. So wealth, citizenship, education, etc. Many other things become social mechanisms through which power can operate. The point is, we can come up with a million examples and we can have a whole dialogue about power. The only point I'm trying to make today is that we must acknowledge that power is unequally distributed. And it's important for us to intentionally acknowledge that for you to be able to do your work effectively. With this understanding of power, then we can begin to understand what I mean when I say privilege. So privilege is unearned power that's granted by the formal and informal institutions of society to all members of a dominant group. Right? We can have privilege in many instances, but it's an unearned privilege. So for example, I right now, as a scientist, I am Dr. Ramos. I have an unearned power in this moment because I am offering this training and I am the one talking, therefore no one else is talking. But I'm explicitly naming that because privilege is usually invisible to those who have it because they're not taught to see it. And in our society, we intentionally don't want to see it or we ignore it even when it does exist. But nevertheless, it puts people who are in power at an advantage over those who don't have it. So if we can go to the next slide, please. I'd like for you to reflect on this notion of power and privilege. And think about how power and privilege, again, privilege being the unearned power that's granted by formal and informal institutions of a society to all members of a dominant group. I'd like for you to be thinking, if you have power and privilege, what does that lead to? And hopefully, at some point in your thought process, you're thinking, well, it could lead to the abuse of power. It could potentially lead to prejudice, a statement or an unjustified statement. It could even lead to oppression, a systemic devaluing or marginalizing of people of certain groups, or systematically disadvantaging individuals from a certain group or under-resourcing communities. Right? So it becomes problematic when power is abused and we have combinations of things like prejudice, attitudes, and behaviors and power. If those things become combined, they can lead to things like oppression. So let's just go through an example so that I can help you get through that thought process that I'm hoping that you can get through on your own, and you may already be there. So we can go to the next slide. I want to walk you through what I think is a very clear example of what I mean. So what you see here on the screen is two pictures. The picture on the left is the status quo picture, and the picture on the right is the diversity picture. So let me walk you through this scenario. So the scenario that I've chosen to use for today is the scenario of a baseball game. We all love baseball, right? So imagine that a baseball league advertises their games to a small group of local organizations, employers, and establishments. The league notices that they are primarily attracting one kind of baseball fan to their games. But they know that there are many more folks who would probably enjoy watching the game, right? So they start off with the status quo, the picture that you see here on the left. But now they're like, wow, we need to diversify our revenue. We need to bring people in. We can't just have one type of individual showing up to our game. We want to even make some money. So then the league sets out to increase diversity among folks that can attend the games. So maybe they widen their promotional efforts. Maybe they lower their ticket prices. Maybe they do outreach at different places. And so they really have diversified who they're recruiting to come to the baseball game. So here in this image, diversity is really about numbers. It's about increasing the number of fans, and it can be from different groups, different identities, different race, different gender, ability, etc. They just increased their outreach, and they thought they're meeting their diversity quota. They're bringing people in. But even though a more diverse group of fans is at the game itself, notice that in the picture on the right, the experience is not uniform. So what you see displayed here on the right side of your screen, we have the obvious example of some folks being able to see the game better than others. So even though they're all physically present, they're not being included in the same way. So this means that some fans might decide that maybe it's not worth it for them to continue to watch the game with this obstructed view, right? This person in the wheelchair can see a part of the game. Maybe they just like bobbleheads, like just the head over the fence, right? So you can imagine that if you were in that person's position, you get frustrated, maybe you leave the game, and maybe you decide to just never come back, or you decide that, going to baseball games just isn't worth your money. So let's continue with the scenario. Let's say you still want, you see that you missed the mark here with diversity. So if you can go to the next slide. Now the baseball league wants to be responsive to the disparities of how fans are experiencing the game. So the league decides that they should address the problem while ensuring that everyone is treated equally. The first picture shows that the three fans are being treated equally, meaning the same, based on the assumption that everyone needs the same level of support. Right? That first picture that you see here shows those three fans being treated equally based on the assumption that everyone needs the same support. This effort, however, does not address the original disparity. Right? The problem has not been solved. The second picture, on the other hand, shows that the three fans are now being treated equitable. They're being treated equitably by providing them with different supports to realize equal access to the game. Okay, so this can sometimes be a trigger word for people. What does equity mean? In this case, it means that you're giving different people different things because they need different supports to be able to show up in the same way to have access. The picture in the middle centrally showcases what an equitable approach might look like. As you can see, the league's resources, though, right, from the league's perspective, in this case, the boxes are their resources. Those boxes aren't equally distributed across fans, meaning not every fan gets a box. But what it does mean is that those boxes were distributed intentionally to achieve what's called an equitable outcome. So the center image here offers an equitable distribution of resources, giving people what they need to be able to show up in the same way. That leads to an equitable outcome. And then in the last picture, this is when we start doing the hard work. In this last picture, what we're doing here is removing that systemic barrier. At the end, I would not necessarily at the end, but like the ultimate goal is that that systemic barrier is removed to enable all three people to see the game without needing any support. We all wish this was the case. We all wish that we didn't have to have this conversation. Maybe you wish that we didn't have to offer this training today. And we all wish that we could remove all systemic barriers. And even if you do remove the systemic barriers, it doesn't mean, however, that there aren't historical implications once that barrier is removed. For example, let's say you remove the barrier. Do you know if the man on the left missed the first half of the game? And so you remove the barrier and he only ended up being able to see half of it, right? We don't know that. So there are in our society many social constructs, many social inequities that act like this systemic barrier, in this case, the fence analogy that I'm using in this baseball game, that create systemic barriers that get in the way of effectively making policies and designing and implementing policies that truly can get at environmental justice. And one of those things is the historical context related to race. So let's define what I mean when I say race so that we're all clear on the same definition. So in this next slide, go to the next slide, please. Race, as you may already know, is a social and political construct that tends to divide people into distinct groups based on characteristics such as your physical appearance, particularly color, right? You often hear of terms like people of color, ancestral heritage, cultural history, and other factors. Right, but it is a social and political construct, right? So in the history of the United States, for example, if you were someone who identified as Irish and you immigrated here, you were defined as being Black, right? In its first iteration of these social constructs that we had in the United States of America as part of our US Census, those definitions existed. How we operationalize, meaning how we define these terms, has changed. Nonetheless, they're still based on characteristics such as physical appearance. So if we understand that race as a social and political construct exists, then the next question should be, so why was it created? Why was race created? How does it help us? What is our society? Why does our society continue to reinforce this construct? Well, race was and continues to be constructed to concentrate power, right? And it concentrates power within a dominant group. Therefore, commonly, race is constructed to legitimize the dominance of one group over another. And we see this happen on a daily basis. And unfortunately, we can't just talk about history because we can talk about racial inequities that continue to exist today. And when we talk about those racial inequities, then we have to define what we mean by racism. So in the next slide, we see racism defined as a system that encompasses economic, political, social, and cultural structures, actions, and beliefs that institutionalize and perpetuate the unequal distribution of privileges, resources, and power between white people and people of color. So as Alan Johnson said, quote, "You can't deal with a problem if you don't name it. Once you name it, you can think it, talk, and write about it. You can make sense of it by seeing how it is connected to other things that explain it and point towards a solution." And we know that all of you are here today because you want solutions for the Central Valley, and you are using an environmental justice lens to incorporate and develop those solutions. So in the interest of naming, we're really talking about racism as a system that structures opportunities and assigning value based on our race. So racism can play out in three forms that are interrelated. If we can go to the next slide, please. So we can have structural and institutional racism, which is differential access to goods, services, and opportunities based on the social interpretation of how you look, so your race. That's again created by policies, practices, and laws. Interpersonal racism is when an individual's behavior is based on differential assumptions about the attributes, motives, and intentions of others, but it's based on race. And then, of course, we have internalized racism, which is internalization of these negative messages about abilities and intrinsic worth among people of color. So you may have heard expressions like someone who, let's say, identifies as Black might say, well, I don't have any values that are based on racism. But when they show up, their behaviors, their messages, they might have internalized negative messages about abilities and intrinsic worth among people of color. So we could have internalized racism. So together, structural, institutional, and interpersonal racism operate across economic, political, and social structures to perpetuate an unequal distribution of privilege, safety, wealth, and resources, and power. In other words, there have been historically in the United States many policies and practices within and across institutions that were developed. Some of them continue to maintain them, and others exacerbate racial inequities. So I have a colleague who says the phrase contemporary structural factors that perpetuate the historical insults need to be named. Meaning if there was a historical injustice that happened and we don't fix the policies so that we can eliminate those systemic barriers, like eliminating the fence at the baseball game, then what we're doing is perpetuating those initial insults that were introduced. So interpersonal racism includes things like bigotry and implicit bias towards individuals. I could give you many examples, but I think you see my point here. The point is that we cannot talk about environmental justice and define environmental justice without explicitly naming that we have to contextualize it within race, power and privilege, and racism. So how do we put this all together? If we can go to the next slide. What really does race have to do with environmental justice and with you being here at this meeting today and having to listen to this training? I'm going to pass it to my colleague Liz to walk us through some historical facts that have led us to how to define environmental justice in our society today, and most importantly, in the policies and practices that we use today. Liz.
Thank you, Amy. And we can go to the next slide. So moving along that thread that Amy just mentioned, the connection between race and environmental justice becomes pretty clear when we start to look at data and notice some significant differences in health outcomes for racial and ethnic minorities and low-income communities. So we see these disparities both when we look back at our history and also when we look at what's happening today. So people often then wonder, well, why do disparities exist? Why are we seeing certain communities who have consistently worse health outcomes compared to others? And that's because, you know, communities of color, our tribal and low-income communities have historically been home to many toxic and polluting facilities and land uses. To the extent that race is actually a predictor for living in close proximity to toxic and hazardous waste sites. So as the EPA even acknowledges, these communities face an array of challenges, including the proximity to polluting facilities, barriers to participating in decision-making processes, disproportionate levels of chronic disease, neighborhood disinvestment, and poor or no access to jobs and services. And so we can go to the next slide. So environmental justice came to be because of these historical disparities where racial minorities were disproportionately being harmed by these pollutants from industry. And so to help ground ourselves in this history, we're showing a very, very abbreviated timeline here with only some key events, just so you know. There's of course a lot more that contributed to environmental justice as we see today that is not included here, but we'll just start with some of the foundational events that I'll highlight. And again, I'm not going to be going through each of these on the slide, so just highlighting a few. Going back to 1968, first we have the Memphis sanitation strike. This was action taken against unfair treatment and environmental justice concerns in Memphis, Tennessee. And Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was actually involved, and this strike was the first time that African Americans mobilized a national broad-based group to oppose environmental injustices. So that was a pretty huge event. Next, looking into 1982, the sit-in against Warren County, the PCB polychlorinated biphenyl landfill. This was the second time that African Americans mobilized a national group by staging a nonviolent sit-in protest. It turns out over 500 people were arrested and the protest was unsuccessful in halting the construction, but this is still a very important event, and it's actually seen as the catalyst for the environmental justice movement. So there was, you know, more than this going on that really catalyzed people to fight more for what Amy was mentioning, the equity and even removing those barriers. In 1983, we see two key publications that provided the first empirical evidence of environmental racism. The first publication was from Dr. Robert Bullard, whose study found that solid waste sites were not randomly scattered throughout Houston, and instead were significantly more likely to be found in predominantly Black neighborhoods and near Black schools. A similar study was also published that year by the United States General Accounting Office, and that similarly showed that hazardous waste sites were also disproportionately found in Black neighborhoods. And so we're seeing that this is not just due to random chance that they were ending up here. And again, as mentioned earlier, race is a predictor for living close to these very toxic sites. So over time, we're seeing environmental justice due to these social events. Environmental justice is being integrated more into agencies such as the EPA, who in 1992 established the Office of Environmental Equity. And then a couple years later, that name was actually changed to the Office of Environmental Justice. In '94, we see President Clinton signing an executive order to address environmental justice in minority and low-income populations. And then our timeline here just ends in 2002 with the EPA developing their environmental justice action plan to truly operationalize and define in practice how environmental justice work is done. And so again, this isn't close even to the whole story, but just some key moments to show all of the work and, blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into getting us to this point where we are today, and even with you all in the room here to do this work.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. I think you skipped the 1979 one. I didn't know if that was intentional or not, but I was curious about those things.
Yes, I did skip those just in the interest of time. I think if we had considered developing a handout, and so I think that's something that we can do and send slides with these details, a little more detail on these events too afterwards. I'm really, really glad folks are curious about these events. Thank you for the question. And so we can move to the next slide. So we've talked a lot about the many factors that contribute to what environmental justice is and how it came to be, but we haven't yet showed an actual definition. So here we are with environmental justice as defined by the EPA. They define it as the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all people, regardless of race, color, national origin, or income, and with respect to development, implementation, and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And on this next slide, here we have another definition, slightly different, and this is more with a vision that goes beyond the regulatory requirements, which we often focus on when we think of environmental justice. So here, I'll share a little bit more of the quote than what's on the screen. Environmental justice refers to the cultural norms and values, rules, regulations, behaviors, policies, and decisions that support sustainable communities where people can interact with confidence that the environment is safe, nurturing, and productive. Environmental justice is served when people can realize their highest potential, where both cultural and biological diversity are respected and highly revered, and where distributive justice prevails. And so again, this definition is a little different. And so as we process that, maybe take a moment and ask yourself, what do you notice about the differences in these two definitions? And we'll leave you with that thought as we move to the next slide. So as we continue adding to our definition of environmental justice, hopefully it is becoming clear, given the history and context of this work, why environmental justice is linked to racial equity, where really the goal for both is to achieve higher quality of life for all. So Cal EPA states that racial equity will be realized when these three conditions are met. First, when race is not a determinant of exposure or proximity to hazardous chemicals, and that exposure is minimized across all groups. Next, that all Californians have access to safe and affordable drinking water, as well as being able to breathe clean air. And last, for Californians to have access to safe and affordable drinking water. And last, that all Californians have access to the information needed to meaningfully participate in the decision-making processes that impact their lives. And so, as we mentioned, this is all a high-level overview, and we can definitely dive so much deeper into these areas to better understand, what this actually means and looks like in practice for the context that you are all working in. And so we can go to the next slide. So I guess we've been throwing out a lot of terms and definitions, and it's easy to get lost in the meaning behind why we're doing all of this. So going to the next slide. All of this foundational knowledge of terminology and concepts is important, especially for those who hold some power around decision-making and policy. It's important that we go beyond just understanding these terms and how they're defined. So you all are here because you already see the importance of this work. And so all of this is to give you more tools in your toolkit to approach the decisions that you will be making, feeling fully equipped with the historical context and a full understanding of those guiding principles behind the environmental justice work. So because our decision makers come into this world with their own lived experiences, their own specialties and wealth of knowledge, again, it can be easy to lose sight of why we're really doing this work when there's so much that goes into environmental justice. But when we lose sight of that, as Amy was mentioning, it can often lead to problems or making decisions that are going to perpetuate the issue rather than working to removing the barrier. So these disproportionate impacts that we've seen for those communities of color, the low income and the tribal communities are the result of those long-term policy and siting decisions that have not factored in that equity perspective. So these policy decisions have led to the cumulative impacts and adverse health outcomes, which really just means a reduced quality of life. But if our decision makers had these tools and really understood the purpose and reasoning behind these principles, we'd have policies that are actively mitigating and reducing the burden of those environmental hazards for those who already have a lot less resources to deal with those problems. And really, these policies would help all of us live healthier and just better lives that have, more fulfilling opportunities. So we can go to the next slide. So we wanted to share an example. It can be difficult, of course, to hear the stories and the lived experiences from those who are part of these environmental justice communities, those that are in close proximity to industry and those environmental pollutants. It can be easy to dismiss or tune out because it's uncomfortable, honestly. But just as we acknowledge the importance of grounding in the historical events that led up to what is now environmental justice, it's important that we continue to ground ourselves in the current reality that too many people are still experiencing negative health outcomes due to environmental hazards and pollution, even with all of the great progress and that has been done so far. And there has been so much work that's been done so far, but we're still seeing this. So we just, again, wanted to share an example what life can look like for people who live near some of those hazards. And we were going to focus on those near port communities. So it's no surprise, I'm sure, that people living in these near port communities can face challenges due to the ongoing exposure to pollutants and toxins. And in fact, the health impacts from these exposures can span across multiple generations. Communities face a range of health risks from environmental problems, including surface and groundwater contamination, illegal dumping, hazardous waste disposal, air pollution, mining waste, habitat destruction, the list goes on. And so we'll start talking about the air. So the emissions from the movement of goods through trucks, marine vessels, trains, and others, as well as emissions from stationary sources like the refineries that are found near port facilities. All of these can introduce many different kinds of air pollutants that seriously impact the health of those who live and work close by. I know this is not new information. Research shows how exposure to air pollution can contribute to significant health problems, including premature mortality, increased hospital admissions for heart and lung disease, increased cancer risk, and increased asthma and respiratory symptoms. And all of that is more significant for sensitive populations, which are children, the elderly, and outdoor workers. We have similar impacts when we look at water. Port operations have a big impact on the neighborhood water quality, with runoff that carries pollutants from the industry into the waterways that not only affect the water that we drink, but this also affects recreation and the things that give us joy and fulfillment in life. You know, so many people love to go out and enjoy these features. Amy mentioned that she likes to kayak. It can be hard to do that when the water that you're trying to kayak in is, you know, toxic from this runoff, and that does happen. So this kind of pollution, when unaddressed, will contaminate our water, end up preventing people from enjoying those creeks, the lakes or bays, and from doing things like eating the fish and shellfish from these waters. We also can't forget that in some cases, community members do still rely on fishing as a subsistence source of food. And so now we can think about light and noise pollution, which are often forgotten as we talk about these other pollutants. And the health impacts from the light and the noise pollution at port operations often include hearing impairment, high blood pressure, and sleep deprivation, all of which may sound maybe a little less severe compared to other health impacts, but as you all know, I'm sure have experienced, these can have a severe trickle-down impact on all areas of your life. I know that personally, I'm not going to be doing my best if I am sleep deprived. And so all of that is kind of painting the picture of what some folks deal with when they're living in these near port communities and close to those environmental hazards. And so we can go to the next slide. So when we think about environmental justice work in terms of increasing quality of life, it isn't just about making sure that we're not all sick from the environmental pollution, but it's also about ensuring we all have the opportunity to find meaning and enjoyment in life. So environmental justice communities often experience stressors beyond just the health disparities, as I was saying. Things like neighborhood disinvestment, income inequality, public safety concerns, extreme weather events like, heat waves without shade or resources to cope. There's also the industrial superblocks, rail lines, and highways that surround ports and can create physical barriers between the residents and the basic necessities such as grocery stores, health services, pharmacies, recreational spaces. Industrial features that are in close proximity to neighborhoods often lack adequate sidewalks, street trees, or even safe intersections for people to cross the streets. There's so much research now that shows even the significant mental and physical health benefits of spending time in nature and interacting with a healthy, clean, and safe environment. So again, environmental justice is not just about focusing on all that is bad, but also recognizing the benefits that we all get from experiencing a clean environment, and then strategizing together on how we can make sure that those benefits are accessible to all. And we can go to the next slide. So as we near the end of our presentation, just want to step back from this big picture and focus again on what this means for you all here today as a part of this environmental justice advisory group. We are, of course, not asking you all to solve racism. That is a very lofty goal that is, outside of your realm, and just wanted to make that very clear. We want to recognize that environmental justice work is done by a lot of different people in different fields with different roles, everyone just doing their part and doing what they can to reduce disparities and work towards promoting that better quality of life. So hopefully, as we have outlined today, environmental justice work is multifaceted and happens in a lot of different ways. all while still being guided by those same principles of equity and justice. So that really is what is uniting us across all of these differences. Many people often think of environmental justice as only that piece of working to reduce the pollution. And again, it's so much more than that. Part of working towards this better quality of life for everyone. Another important part of this work is to ensure that equitable access to and distribution of resources. And so again, want to connect this work to your local context. We know that in the Central Valley, historically, there's been a disconnect between community members and the local air district, where folks who were of some communities were not able to access all of the opportunities that are available. And so that lack of access is worsening the already there disparities rather than working towards equity and removing those barriers. So in this example, after taking that first step to just acknowledge the mismatch, acknowledge that disparity, one solution that came out was to develop an environmental justice strategy to outline how to work with community members in a way that makes meaningful connections and provides more visibility and awareness of the resources that are available. And part of this work, as you know, is to work with the community, take their feedback on ways to improve and increase participation. And so again, we just want to acknowledge everyone in this room has their own identities and reasons for being here and doing this work as a volunteer. And so we want to highlight again that doing environmental justice work does not mean that everybody has to have the same views and beliefs. Instead, it's really about embracing our differences and working to understand and learn from each other as we connect and work towards that shared goal of that better quality of life for everyone. And so, again, there are so many directions that we can go with this work, but just wanted to end with connecting it back to the work that you all are doing. And I'm going to pass it back to Amy to close us out.
Go to the next slide, please. So where do we go from here? So we were invited and we're delighted to be here tonight to provide you with some historical context on the definition of environmental justice. We hope that we met our outcome of allowing you some space to reflect on your own definition of environmental justice and really update the definitions and principles that we've just reviewed today. We commit to engaging in this work moving forward together. We'd be happy to come back and continue the dialogue. We really do fundamentally believe that it's groups like yours that have the opportunity to eliminate the status quo and address the systemic inequities. Very much like removing that fence in the baseball game. You all have that capacity with the power and privilege that you have to be part of this group. So we hope that our presentation and our training is only a launching pin to continue our work together. Ideally, these kinds of conversations are held in person in a workshop style where we can have more interactive and potentially you're able to share things about your identity, share some meaningful engagement and learning. We acknowledge that. So this is just one overview and we were very selective on what we highlighted today. Liz and I believe that we are never done learning. This is a continuous process and we hope that if you do have questions, concerns, and you have more desires to continue learning about this information, we are open and willing to come back to this group or other groups like yours. If you do need to get a hold of us, you can go to the next slide. We have our contact information here. And as Ryan mentioned at the top of the hour, we do work with the AB 617 communities in the Central Valley. So we could work with providing you all additional resources if the desire is there. At this point, this concludes our presentation and our training for today. I do believe we don't have any time for questions, but if there's some burning questions that need to be addressed, we're happy to take a moment to address those before handing the mic back to Laura.
Thank you very, very much. This is Laura. Thank you very much for being here and for offering this training. I don't know about anybody else, but I wrote several notes to research further on some of those studies and some new definitions of things that I hadn't thought about. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be here tonight. And I thank Naimeen for suggesting this for a long time. It's been a long time coming. I appreciate it.
Chair, comment to the two presenters, and Ryan is here on the staff side of, because I have various questions and concerns, because I represent a group in 1940, went to relocation camps called concentration camps, the Japanese Americans, citizens of this country. And in 1941, Congress proposed legislation to sterilize all women over the age of 14, Japanese Americans. It's in the, so, but in some of the things, I think environmental, I think how we define environmental, I guess, the surrounding areas. That is one of my questions in some of your notes, is that the Japanese Americans came back from camp and never said a word. Never said a word to their children or anybody about what happened. Okay. So I look at some of those and how we use the word environmental. Okay. I look at environmental more than just air quality, and you have to. The other thing I think would be great, and I think, Ryan, this is something that I don't know how we make this not part of this discussion, right? But there's everybody in this room, except for probably me, maybe, don't have children. Okay. But if you have children or you have nieces and cousins and all of that, the biggest thing, I taught college for years, and high school and even junior college. And what I've seen today, when I hear from my friends, their kids having kids, 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, 17-year-olds, is a thing called drugs. Of what influence does that have in our environmental communities of justice is that lower income families seem to be hit with drugs. Because I see that and I hear about it. And being on community hospital board for 19 years, I've seen what showed up at the emergency room. So I think what you brought up, as you stated at the end, this is only the covering of something. But in this entire discussion, I did not use your comment as only to include air quality. EPA is one of the agencies, but you have the Department of Health. USDA in 1992 discriminated against some close to 1 million Black farmers in the United States. When they went for a loan, everybody else got 4%. When they went to the Farmers Home Administration, they got charged 12% because they were Black, because they felt that they didn't have it all takes. So I think I don't want us to just think as when we're hearing and discussing things that it's only air quality. I, in my mind, look at this thing as broader than that, because I see today the children of what our kids are going through and the pressures. And we've lost one thing. We rely on this thing called the phone when we don't rely on the thing called the mom and dad and the family having dinner every night or 5 days a week like some of us have. So I just want to say for the two ladies and for Ryan and for Chair Laura and Nami for having this discussion, because I don't think it should stop, because it's more than just an environmental and it's more than just business. Because Dr. Cardiovascular surgeon that was on the board from St. Agnes made it very clear that when you lose your job, you go through a tremendous amount of emotional health stress that destroys you, worse than air quality at the end of the day. So I think this opens the door for discussions. I would really hope, Ryan, that maybe we put something together between CAC and the EJAG community to have probably I'd hate to say a little summit on some of these items, because I think it's important for us to look at everything. When I was in the hearing today, I heard a lot of things, but I didn't hear about the job loss. I didn't hear about other impediments hurting our communities. And we attack the small rural communities because there's where you go after it. When you destroy 1 million acres on the west side, it's not going to be planted anymore. What happens to Avenel? What happens to Mendota? They become victimized by bad people.
Absolutely.
But I think this was well worth it, tremendous. And I think we need to carry it forward. I don't think we should just stop this thing here, because I wrote down several notes like Laura did. But I have a discussion that it needs to be broader. And we need to really start looking at that. Don't blame, we can't blame the air district. We need to think about our own self. What did we cause? What did we do? Because the air district can't take care of family problems, family health, family drugs, emotional issues, the 151s, the Vietnam War. So I think it was a great opportunity. I think we need to continue. I think it warrants it, because what I heard today was a lot of blaming of the air district and ARB. Well, ARB. And that should have not have been the discussion. If we're gonna blame an agency, wait a minute. We are the people. We are the humans. And let's talk about all of the impediments then. Don't just blame it on that the business is no good. Because if you eliminate the businesses, now we have some emotional, we have problems. So again, I want to thank you, Ryan and Nominee, for the presentation. I've been asking for it. And Laura, thank you for doing it. And the two presenters, excellent. I think it was well time spent this evening. Thank you.
I have a quick comment. Richard O'Brien from the North. As we move forward on EJAG, we're given some tools. I'd like to know how those tools, as we're implementing them, like me as a mayor of a city, the general plan for EJAG, how does that balance with what we going forward? I'm not going to go backwards. Going backwards doesn't really help. We have to move forward. So how does that really truly help us as we move forward in evaluating and correcting the injustices out there, especially as it comes to CEQA, and then at the same time fighting NIMBYism. But I want to tell you both, you did a superb job. Thank you, and I hope we get to hear you again.
I have a quick comment as well. I just wanted to say thank you. It was a great presentation. I know it was mentioned that Naeem's been advocating for this. I don't mean to give some of that credit to myself. I'm just saying this as a factual thing. It was asked for even before Naeem was on the board. When I was on the board, I know. I want to say at least 5, maybe even 6 years ago, that this was first asked for to have a presentation like this at one of these meetings. I just thought it was important to point that out. And number 2, this is the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, the job of which is to give advice to the Air Board through the perspective of environmental justice. And I always thought, I don't understand if we haven't had a discussion like this, how are folks that maybe have not gone through presentations or workshops similar to this can give advice to the Air District through an environmental justice lens? Not to discount the fact that folks are doing environmental justice advocacy that might not be even familiar with that term. Through civil rights advocacy and social justice advocacy, they might not even know about environmental justice, but they are doing the work. So I'm not trying to discount if you haven't gone through this training, you can't give input on environmental justice. But just to point that out, that we've gone at least 6 years. I don't know if a presentation like this has ever been done. I'm talking about before my time even. And so I'm just glad that it finally did happen. And I agree that we should continue this conversation because there's so much more that can be learned. Even, some of the things mentioned in the presentation that, like was said, we didn't have time to go into. And I'll try to just keep it short at that. Thank you.
Thomas, that was my fault. I'm sorry. I forgot. Yes, we did talk about this many years ago and I apologize. I forgot about that.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Keith.
So my concern is that after this presentation, and the amount of money that they took out of the budget to do this, are we actually calling this group the right name? Because now I'm confused about adding all this inclusion work into the name of Environmental Justice Advisory Group, because it seems like we need something that labels it social, civil. I don't understand.
I don't
I'm
think
confused
so.
about that.
I don't think
I'm
so.
confused about the name environmental justice.
I still think that it still is environmental justice. It's a inclusive term, environmental justice, I
And that-
believe.
That's the name of the group. So
Because
if you're
I'm-
confused because you didn't understand what environmental justice is and you are not alone, that's why we wanted to ground it ourselves. So we all have, because that we don't have to rename the group. If you see when the EJAG was created, it's the title, Environmental Justice Advisory Group. So we're not changing a thing. We're just, having a common understanding of what is our charge. Why are we here?
Well, I'm speaking for myself. And so speaking for myself, I'm confused about maybe my definition of the word environmental. Brian, you understand where I'm coming from?
I think then let me express what I think you're saying, and by all means, Keith, correct me. I think we've talked about, and I think through the conversation that Manuel had, that this is a much broader and complex, and there are a lot more factors that play into the health of the community besides just environmental.
Yeah.
Just the social component. Now, but this is the air pollution control district, so it's like,
Yeah.
like in regards to what us as an agency can do, we definitely have to focus on the environmental side. Not to say that there aren't a whole host of other factors, but is in regards to what this group and what our agency can do to help do our part in those communities, it really deals with the environmental side. And so to me, that's the focus specifically for this group. Now, like Manuel was saying, really appreciate Richard O'Brien also sharing. It looks like he may have left, but also talking about, depending on your roles in your communities, there's a lot more opportunities to play a bigger part in all those other aspects. Being here and hopefully the learning that you got here and the conversation that we had, it prompts you to talk about it with others that you may, then bring them in to what we're doing here and to provide more input and more feedback to what we're doing, but also looking at those other things.
But am I defining the word environment correctly? I mean, isn't this about the environment?
So no, like,
or am I supposed to be thinking about the term a lot more broad?
So yes, like it is a much broader term, but
Okay.
in regards to what this group has been tasked with, it really is focused in specifically on the air.
That's the word, environmental
We're not focusing on
justice.
DEI, we're focusing on the health aspects and the air thing right now. The other one, it's just for educational purposes.
Yes.
Right.
Was that Derek? What was
I
that?
was just saying that,
Turn your mic on.
so it is on. That what I'm seeing, from my hearing from Brian, is that we are focused on the health aspects of it. We're focused on the air quality aspects of it. You could almost take this presentation kind of from that middle page 18 or whatever, when it really started talking about the definitions of EJ. And if you're in respect to this group, it would kind of take off from that point. The beginning part where you get into the inclusion and all that other DEI stuff. That's not something that is part of our purview as well of what we do here, but it's educational. It gives us, it's just to broaden our understanding of what people are looking at, but it's not part of our charter, shall we say.
I disagree, because if we don't know that we are the environmental justice advisory group, and what does that mean? We might not agree with, I know that you said you disagree with the concept about power and privilege. We might feel uncomfortable with those words, but the matter of the fact is that if we want to be advising the Air District about how to play a role in achieving equity for these communities that are polluted by, having diesel trucks or having an oil well next to their houses. I'm not saying that all of a sudden we're going to talk about all the social issues as much as we want, but we do need to see that we are not acting in a vacuum. All these racial structures had created these situations in which some people are in more disadvantaged positions. And that's how, the first part of the conversation was, connected. But I think that we need to understand what is a community that we are representing here. I am here because I feel that there are a lot of environmental injustices in Fresno County that I would like to do my part to transform that. That's why I'm here. So to me, I think it's connected.
I think that's why we're all here for that.
Yeah,
Is it okay if I make a comment?
yeah, please.
Sure.
Comment? Okay, so I'm gonna kind of get off of what Keith said a little bit and just say, like Manuel, I've been here since basically day one of EJAG. My first year I was here as a member of the public, and then starting the second year I was on EJAG, and I've been here ever since. And if you remember the original charter, shall we say, of purpose of the EJAG when it was formed then, it was originally set up as a way of making sure the policy that came out of the district did not negatively impact disadvantaged communities. In other words, what was being done was fair and equitable to everybody. And it was to try to make sure, in other words, we would make sure that those communities were not being unfairly taken advantage of and by any regulations that came out of the district. That was the original. Now it has metamorphed since then into broader and different areas. But like when Manuel talks about the impact of losing 1 million acres or several 100,000 acres. Is it 1 million acres already? It probably has been by now, hasn't it?
No,
Not quite.
By 2030.
By 2030. Okay, so those aren't because of regulations that have come out of the Air District.
No,
Those are regulations that have had to do with water probably more than anything else.
State Water Board.
And so, and yet the state has their environmental justice group that somehow hasn't kept that water flowing to those farms and kept those jobs in place. So there are problems with the state of California. We're actually doing probably a better job here than what the state of California is doing for the underprivileged communities as far as keeping jobs in those communities, the farming jobs, keeping the food being produced. So we have food security, job security, and almost anything you want to name. With no jobs, we have no communities. Everybody has to leave. We saw what happened south of the border when there were civilizations down there that were smart enough to farm the valleys and save the water in the hills, and they lived in the hills. We did not manage things right when we settled in here. So I'm just, that's my pontification there is that there are still problems. We wouldn't be losing these jobs. We wouldn't have the problems Manuel was talking about if the water side of the thing was focusing on things like we're focusing on.
Okay, so yeah, so we could name that regulatory regulatory injustice, right?
Injustice.
So we could rename that regulatory injustice, but my concern is when we talk about power and privilege, if we talk about inclusion and do you think that does bad air discriminate against the people who live in mansions on the bluff versus the people who live in San Joaquin?
So to answer that question, there are differences in the air quality. And now we have a regional, we're regional air pollution.
We're a regional air pollution control,
Right.
right? Okay.
Right, but There's also been, like some of the things that we talked about here. Toxic air pollutant exposure. Like depending on where you live, you have much less exposure to that. And so that's one of the things that we talk about when we bring the incentives to this group and we talk about. Correct.
So we all breathe bad air, but some areas we.
So one of the most, yeah.
Recently improving air. Now that I'm eating.
I don't know if you've ever been out to Harris Ranch, but one of the most exclusive and luxurious hotels and restaurants in the west side gets inundated on a daily, almost daily basis with cattle dust that comes from the feedlot of his own feedlot. And if you've ever been out there when the wind blows right, I mean, if you're talking about environmental justice and what's dirty and what's going on, I mean, what do we say now? Do we say that the people that live in, let's say, box houses down the street from Harris Ranch are treated different, should be treated different than the people who live in Harris Ranch?
No, what we're talking about here is if, you know, and I've been out there and I know the area well. That used to be my inspection area. So when I was an inspector, I was out there every day, and I know exactly what you're talking. I inspected the feedlot and made sure they were complying with requirements and doing things to mitigate dust and through our rules and regulations. What we're doing here is we're developing strategies to find ways to make improvements in different areas. I mean that's like the big thing that we're doing here. We're looking at, okay, we have disadvantaged low-income communities throughout the valley, and there's things that we can consider, and we bring them to you. You often bring them up as agenda topics for this committee to consider, but that's one of the main things that we do. It's like, okay, how do we make improvements in different parts of the valley that need it the most, and what additional things should we be considering? What programs do we have that may benefit those communities more that we should consider supporting? Through our goals and objectives, what type of education should we be doing in those communities? What languages should we be looking to provide that education in those communities? That's all the feedback, and that's feedback that we consistently get from this group. And that's why it is important and that, that this group is here, and that's why it's so important.
Ryan and Lord, I'll make this comment, is that absolutely correct. Because we did the fireplace. We did the clean filters now for the smoke and all that in these very small rural communities, right? Purifiers along the Wood Lake, Rosy Cutler, Orange Cove. So you're absolutely correct 100% of what you've brought to us and we bring back to you. And we've come from different areas. And so I think
wait, Manuel, while you're on that, is the rule still state that if the only source of heat you have is burning wood, can people still burn wood regardless of what the nature of our regulatory environment?
There is
Am I correct about that?
So for our fireplace wood burning heater regulation, there is a sole source exemption that allows you to.
Everybody's talked about that. Everybody went through it. So
now what we've done though, in working with the Environmental Justice Advisory Group, is there was a recommendation to increase the funding amounts to look to put in cleaner devices in people's homes for that very reason.
You'd be letting our speakers sign off because we've been holding them here while we chat.
Well, I just wanted to make sure before they sign off, I wanted to make sure that we're clear, that I was clear while the speakers were still here, that I was reading the right message. I mean, they have an objective and they had a goal in mind. And if they made their presentation correctly, they wanted to probably get input of if their impact of their presentation met their expectations.
Well, I think the impact of their presentation is what we're doing right now.
Yeah, that's why it stimulated this
And
conversation
I
for
would
me.
say thank you so much, both
Yeah.
Dr. Ramos and Liz, for
Yes.
helping us to foster this level of discussion and communication that that several of the EJAG members have requested. So thank you so much.
Before I let you ladies go, I'd like to go to Bakersfield to see if they have had any comments or questions because we've kind of excluded them a little bit.
Sorry.
There are no comments in Bakersfield.
Okay, thank you very much. And so thank you, ladies, very much.
Thank you so much for having us. It was a delight, and we look forward to following up with you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm thinking, let's go ahead and close the conversation for now, being that we're
We're supposed to be getting out.
yeah, we're at 7:30, and so we still have,
You know, we've done 617 every meeting. Is there anything new that needs to be
I
talked about?
don't, I mean, I have a couple of slides that I could probably run through in about 2 minutes. If you
Yeah.
want, or
take it away, Ryan.
Go- go-
No,
go
go
for it.
for it.
Take it away.
next slide. So just real quick, as you all remember, we have 4 selected communities: South Central Fresno, Shafter, Stockton, Arvin, Lamont, that we're continuing to work with them on implementing a community emission reduction program to do this exact work. Focus strategies in areas that have elevated levels of pollution. Next slide. One of the things that we talked about here and the need for is more outreach and education. So we are getting out there. Both the community strategies and resources group that Jessica oversees, as well as, in this case, our APCO and as well as our outreach and communications. That was actually an event where we were giving air purifiers away to the community. And it's the different strategies and the feedback that we actually take back from the EJAG, for example, and how we have to think about people participating in programs. It's not always the same. What works for one doesn't work for all. Next slide. So we're at a lot of back to school activities right now. Specifically, our staff travel and visit all the schools throughout the valley. If there's any schools that you know of specifically that would benefit or you'd like to see us go to, please provide us that information, and we're happy to coordinate that and get out there. Next slide. One of our biggest programs, and it was actually recognized by the Association of Air Pollution Control Agencies, which is a national organization of air pollution control agencies, as one of the best practices in the country. We have our Healthy Air Living Schools. We're actually going and we're educating not only the students, but also the teachers and the administration on the actions that they can take to help protect the health of their students. Next slide. So just a real quick update on the Valley-wide Clean Air Rooms program progress. So this year we've issued over 2,700 devices. Since the program was launched as a pilot in 2022, we've given out more than 18,500. And when we're talking about trying to make air quality more equitable, this is one of the main things. Not everybody can afford a device like this, and so having the ability to get this device and to use it results in better health outcomes. Period. Fewer.
Multiply that number by 4, minimum of 4, for the number of people that do that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we are collecting that information about how many people are living in homes. And so, yes, that's just number of devices, but on average, they're 2 to 4 people per home. Yeah. So that's fewer asthma attacks, that's fewer visits to emergency rooms, it's fewer missed days at work, so tremendous. Yeah.
Your body heals.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and kind of getting back to making this more accessible to more people. It's not just English and Spanish speakers. It's Hmong, it is Punjabi, it is. So if there are more languages that we need to get things out, let us know. We're happy to do that translation and get those materials out there. Next slide, please. That's it. All right, I'm done. It is. No, and so that on that slide, it actually, I think it covered
We made
So
Ryan
we still
speedy.
have roughly $760,000. So it is.
Get a 10-minute presentation in a minute and a half.
Who needs Jessica?
Got my vote. Run for office. District.
Okay, so number 10, district comments.
Yeah, the only comment I have is that we currently have 3 vacancies open. I know we've talked about it, the ethnic small business, we still have 2. We are definitely, I think I know who your candidate is gonna be, and I think that'd be a oh, really? Okay, all right, well, then we will get that. So, one of the language interpreters that we work with has shown interest, and so we will definitely get that. Yeah, she actually lives in the I think it's Visalia area. Yeah, and
Yeah, I've pushed it out on my social media sites, everything, trying to get my guys involved. People just,
yeah. And that it, you know, I don't need to tell all of you, it is a commitment, and that's why we do appreciate you so much, and we try to get good food that hopefully you like, and yeah, and entices. Now I just have to figure out something that for Manuel to.
No.
I don't have to worry about him.
I walk in and you guys have metal
yeah,
serving trays.
I would like to order Portuguese food next time.
I will write that down.
Like gluten here.
Um, the-
I'm seeing a little privilege in there. What do you?
So, I mean, we have reached out to all the local chambers of commerce and let them know about it, and talk to them about the importance of the group. And so we're very hopeful that we will have some new members shortly.
Okay.
And those are my comments.
Okay, then that brings us to number 11, potential future EJAG meeting agenda items.
Okay, so I went to a organic presentation the other day at the
Organic farming?
organic farming. Were you there?
Oh, no.
No. And it was a really good presentation, and I met some gentlemen there from Asia that have put together a new product that can break down cellulose in wood on a very rapid rate. And I asked them if they would be interested in participating with the Air District in trying to get an experiment going with the guys that are chipping, because the chippers have had a problem with the cost of getting past the point of after they chip, how do they spread, how do they incorporate. So this would be a solution, a potential probable solution that if these guys can, and they said they could do this. I asked them if is there any way they could take their product, treat the wood as it's coming off the conveyor as being chipped. It's a liquid product. It would go onto the wood, stay in the pile, and then it would reduce that pile down to practically an ash product within a year. And so that would eliminate the necessity for actually reincorporating and make it a lot easier to reincorporate. And it also turns it into a more viable and immediate food source. Yeah.
Do you have contact information?
Yes, I do.
Okay, I'll get that information from you after the meeting, and
Great.
we'll reach out to them.
Okay.
Any other?
Would you have for the next EJAG meeting, which will be September, right?
Correct.
Could we probably be that we ask.
October.
Yeah. That we would have, well, I don't think it's gonna be too late then, but let's have the presentation of the SIP that was forwarded to Region 9. Because I think there was a lot of work that went into that from your whole staff and everybody. And I think it'd be.
So you're talking about the full presentation that we gave to the board, or like a condensed version of?
Well, condensed, but actually what did go forward to them. Okay, because I know there were some discussions in that activity. Just to Keith's idea, Keith, any agricultural activities of any type of research or anything, I deal with a lot of them. It has to go through the ag tech. It has to go through ag tech. So Ryan would get the materials, then he'll bring it to ag tech. And then ag tech will talk about it. Because we have too many, how we describe those folks, salesmen. Salesmen that are gonna sell, they're selling the best thing ever.
Manuel, I've been in this business a long time. When I see something that works, I respect it. And I appreciated the work ethic they have, the research they put into it, the presentation they made at this place.
We
And
have-
we'll do what we need to do to get it in front of the right people.
Everything goes to Ag Tech on Ag. That was.
I don't know who Ag Tech is. Who's Ag Tech?
Tech was formed in 1992, 93 under the research of the San Joaquin Valley Study Agency. The study agency does all the research. It did on the Sarmac, Seacoast and everything. And that's where we find, and that's where we go for direction upon this district doing stuff on any type of regulation. I don't need that.
Goes through Ag Tech.
But the staff would present it. The staff would present it.
Who's in charge of Ag Tech?
The district.
The
So that's
district.
It's a district group or
Yeah, we hold the
company?
meetings here.
Okay. Oh,
Ag.
I thought you were talking about something at Fresno State or something.
No. This is part of the,
Yeah.
Oh, you're doing it here under Ag Tech within your
Yes.
staff. Okay.
Ryan, you'll take care of all that.
Yeah, so we get that information.
Okay. I'm sorry. I didn't understand who Ag Tech was.
I learned something too after. all
Yeah,
these years.
screening company.
Never too old to learn.
no,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, that's great. Fantastic. That's perfect.
Anything else to add to future agenda items? Okay, seeing none, I'll call for a second public comments opportunity.
Okay, are there any public comments in Modesto?
No public comments in Modesto.
Thank you. Any public comments in Bakersfield?
No public comments in Bakersfield.
Thank you. There's no members of the public in Fresno and seeing no comments online.
Okay. So number 13, EJAG member comments. We had quite a few already.
Have one.
Okay, go ahead, Keith.
I just want to let EJAG know and all the members and staff know that I had a pacemaker put in last time I was here, since the last time, our last meeting. And so I'm still getting adjusted and used to that. So I go through these bouts of pain and different things happening to my body in my heart to adjust. So if I get up and leave, it's not a reflection of anything that I'm trying to say or do. I'm just trying to adjust, like I tried some coffee tonight. I'm not sure if I should have done that. So I just wanted to make sure you guys know I just had a pacemaker put in it. Feeling good. Yeah, thank you.
We all took a vote. We'll call 911, but that's about it.
If I lock up, just don't call the cops.
You're looking very good. Seeing no other
I got a
comments.
comment.
Oh, yes, please.
Well, first I'll start with a quick question. I think I know the answer, but I want to just be sure. We're not offering virtual participation for the EJAG members at this time. Is that correct?
No.
Correct.
I think, most people know that I pretty regularly attend these meetings. I missed the last two. I probably could have attended if there was a virtual option, because it's not that I didn't have this particular time to be at the meeting. It's just that I was not in the area, including, a celebration of life for, a family member that passed away. And especially because we only have these meetings every 2 months. I missed 2 meetings. That's 4 months. And then you're talking about the months after that. So we're, it's like a half a year almost of missing meetings. I'm not sure if it's just like maybe a cost issue. We're set up to have these, satellite offices where we can all be on virtually with each other in the 3 offices. We had presenters today that were on Zoom. I would just ask the district to consider, I think, having that virtual option. I think it goes along with some of the points that were made in the presentation about
I
how
concur.
hard it
I
is
concur.
to always, make a meeting in person. Especially, I'm lucky I live nearby this office, but you got folks from Stockton that have to make the drive and et cetera.
So it's my understanding of through the Brown Act that we would have to, if you're remote, you would have to be in a public space somewhere and you would have to post a notice as to basically what the meeting is about, what's happening. And I think that that's what prevents us from doing things remotely other than when it was suspended during pandemic.
Is that, so are we?
I
Brown
do
Act
know
it out
as
for us?
somebody that sits on state boards, that is allowed. There's been executive orders. I know there's a difference between Bagley-Keene and the Brown Act, but and so I don't have all of that information, but I think it's something that should be looked at and that we should consider it as a possibility if we are able to.
Okay.
So does that mean our presenters had to be in a place where somebody could?
No.
It's
Only members.
Only members.
Because you're a voting, like, you're a voting body and
Ryan, this is a public meeting.
this is a public meeting.
So I mean, it's a public meeting. So I think it's a good idea to have that option.
So
It's a public.
here's what I will do. We'll put together a response to that specific request, and we will share it with via email to the group.
We could also take action through, and the Brown Act can be changed, but sometimes they can do changes, they can do modifications, can't they?
No, the Brown Act is not changed, sorry.
No, they can't, they don't have an emergency
No.
clause?
Only if the governor of California issues an executive
Order like with COVID.
COVID. That's the only person can do
Well,
it.
that is coming soon again anyway under the monkey pox.
So
So it won't be long, about a month.
we'll look into that specific request, Tom, and we'll let everybody know.
Thank you, appreciate it. And
Okay.
We want to avoid that to the maximum extent.
Yeah. Okay. Any other comments
Manual heart attack. there.
from Modesto? I think,
You're gonna
Thomas,
have
are
to
you
get
the only
a
one
picture.
there? Okay.
No other comments.
Okay. And then in Bakersfield, any comments?
I just had a question. I wanted to know if the district tracks valley fever metrics and if there has been any increase in that with the recent earthquakes that we've been happening. I've had some community members be concerned about those two things linked possibly. So I was just wondering if that's something we can refer our community members to go and look up, just like the air quality indexes that we have.
That's a good question, Randeep, and that is not something our agency looks at specifically. There are a lot of public health
department
institutes
does.
that are, tracking that. And what we can do is we can look into trying to find that information and connecting you with it.
Which state department?
Perfect, thank you.
Department of
Soil,
Health.
you're talking-
No,
Health
Health
Department.
Department. Yeah, because a lot of things are in the ground like parvo and everything else.
and US, California Department of Health and Human Services handles valley fever.
Yeah.
And so Fresno County, Kern County, everybody's Department of Health handles, we've been dealing with them because we've been providing N95s to the farm workers in those areas where there may be. We don't know because it could be in your backyard. So, but it's the Department of Health that handles that.
Do we address Mr. Graywall as vice chair now?
I guess I got a promotion.
No money with it though, sorry.
Okay, so our next meeting is scheduled for October 24th at 5:30. Unless anything changes. With that, I will call this meeting adjourned at 7:45. Again, thank you all for being here and for the robust conversations. I appreciate all of you.
Thank you,
Good
Laura.
night.
Much appreciate it.